Abel Contemporary? Yeah. Okay. Last time it shared it to my personal page. And
Yeah, don't do that.
Right. I'm going to make sure it doesn't do that. There it is. All right, we are live.
Hello, everybody. I'm Teresa Abel. I'm the owner of the Abel Contemporary Gallery, and I am pleased to be here for another one in our series of artist conversations. Tonight, we are so pleased to be joined by Tom Jaszczak. He has a fabulous solo show in the gallery right now. It is called Still Life, a Minimalist Approach. We are going to look at a walkthrough of Tom's show in the gallery space. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Tom as you're looking at this video. And then I'm going to have a great conversation with him about his work in general, about his studio practice, and this specific body of work. At the end of our conversation, we're going to open it up for questions. So if you have any questions, you are welcome to type them in if you're watching us through Facebook Live. So if you're joining us, you know that you can watch this through our website, abelcontemporary.com, or live on Facebook. I'm also joined by Ann Orleski and Lauren Miller of the Abel Contemporary Gallery, and they are helping do the technical aspects of this video production. So thanks for joining us. Tom, welcome and thanks. Tom received a Bachelor of Arts in Visual Art and a Bachelor of Science in Biology from Bemidji State University. After graduating, Tom apprenticed at Mill Creek Pottery for a year and learned the process of wood firing. Following, he was an artist in residence at the Cub Creek Foundation. Tom grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and returned in 2010, where he was the recipient of a Jerome Project grant through the Northern Clay Center and a Minnesota Arts Board grant. He has been an assistant to Tara Wilson and a summer resident at the Armory Art Center in Florida and the Archie Bray Foundation. Most recently, he started a long-term residency at the Archie Bray Foundation in Helena, Montana, where he focused on developing a red earthenware soda-fired body of work. He now lives in Minnesota with his wife, Maggie Jaszczak, who's also a potter, where they have a studio and a showroom. So thank you, Tom, for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. So we're looking at this great installation of your new body of work. Is there anything from my intro that I missed that people should know about you?
No, yeah, I mean, after the Archie Bray Foundation, me and Maggie were residents at Penland School of Craft for 3 years. So that's maybe the only gap, but yeah. No,
great, good.
good
Fantastic, great. So we've been showing your work for quite a while and love your work. This is well, it's not a very new direction, but it's definitely a different direction in your work. You're still using the same techniques of soda firing and the same clay body, but it's definitely the imagery on the work is different. So I'm wondering if we could start to talk a little bit about when you started to develop this new body of work and what your inspiration for it was.
Sure, like maybe backpedaling to what I was making is the starting point of, the other work was color blocks and very Bauhaus and Modern kind of inspired pots, which is what you've shown for, 10 years or something like that. And
right.
That work had primary color as like a focal point as far as, small bits of primary color with the earthy background of soda firing. And I was just trying to move away from those primary colors and trying to make bigger pieces of color in my work that was more pastel And then at the same time, I was thinking more of like sculptural still life, like how can I, incorporate pots in sort of a, just like grouping pots rather than painting on them. And then after playing a little bit with that, then I started to just paint on, using the same kind of cutout techniques and things like that as my other work. Started painting on them, just, a few pots at a time in a kiln load, and then kind of building that up throughout this year. And it really just comes from trying to figure out how to use other colors. Because I don't think if you look at my other work, I don't think, like you were saying, it makes sense to jump to imagery.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was really just about color, not about trying to put imagery in my work. And that's just where I'm having fun now.
It's great. So yeah, so this is an image of some of the other work from quite a while ago, which is indicative of what you were doing before with the pattern. And so really, like when you say you were thinking about working in groupings, meaning you were thinking about grouping individual pieces, not that you were thinking about making these groupings of images on the work.
Yeah, like a Gwen Hansen Piggott kind of way, or my own version of that.
Right.
So, just like quiet pots, but and also like the wheel thrown fruit, trying to figure out how those fit in, because they're not pots, but they are still pots to me. Like they're still vessels in a way. So yeah, that was a big part. A big part of this has to do with that wheel thrown fruit of like how can I play with that and incorporating those into a physical still life while still maintaining functional pottery. That there's kind of a gap there that needed to be filled. So
yeah, and I love this. So recently I found online, I don't know how long ago it was, but it was, I can't even remember who produced it, if it was the Northern Clay Center or someone. It was a video of you showing how you were doing your color block work, where you were cutting out and doing. And so if you could explain briefly how you do that. And are you using that technique on this where you're cutting out shapes? You're not painting? Are you painting?
no, yeah, I'm just I'm using tape, the same tape technique for this work. The only painting is really happening within the shapes of pots or fruit or whatever. So the technique I came up with to make those graphics or color blocking make sense in the previous body of work. I put tape on and I put black over the tape, and then I wipe the black off, and the height of the tape makes this really clean, crisp line, which you can see in some of the still life work. I'm using a similar technique to make shadow on the pots that are painted on the pots. And then I put wax over that tape and then peel the tape off. And then the color will go very cleanly where the tape or vinyl or whatever I'm using was. And so that's still the same technique I'm using for this. It's just different layering and like maybe blending some pastel colors just to kind of create volume in the paintings. And I want them to be Morandi-esque, so they don't have like a ton of shadowing, like this. These vessels are very flat. They only read as vessels based on shape, really, not because he's using light that much.
Right. And the viewer's knowledge. So as a viewer, we bring this, we recognize that shape, and then we make them dimensional kind of in our minds, even though they're very flat.
Yep. And even like the light is just coming like in that cone shaped vessel. It's like the cone just being a little bit darker yellow. That's basically the use of light, which that was like looking at that. And then if you connect my last body of work, that there's a lot of parallel there, I think.
Yeah. It's a beautiful interpretation of Morandi's work, I think. And yeah, like that's a great example of it, that image that's up right now. And I think this technique that you've developed is, I mean, it's beautiful in the color blocking work, but it's really effective in the way that you're getting the shadows and things in the forms of the vessels on the pottery. It's just fantastic.
Okay. I think
So
if you saw me draw freehand, it would be quite horrible. So it's like,
that was something
it's
I
like
wanted to ask you because, when we first started to show your work, because I don't know, I'm a painter. I mean,
Mhm.
actually all of Anne, Lauren, we all paint. And I think a lot of the staff, your work always seemed painterly to me. And I loved the forms and everything, but I loved the color block because it reminded me of, sort of modernist or mid-century painting that I loved, or Bauhaus painting. And so it made me wonder. And then with this body of work, I thought, Tom, have you ever painted? Do you paint?
Nope.
No,
Yeah,
wow.
it just, there's like a certain part about, like, whenever I show my work and, am present, whether that's sort of like a pop-up show or a gallery exhibition, like at Abel, I think when you talk to people, they always read that. And then that's like where I built confidence in thinking about this and actually being able to, like, I can paint fruit on, like, I can take this color blocking, it could be fruit. And there's a little bit of confidence when you're playing with, a big name like Morandi or whatever, that is, still I'm embarrassed about that, trying to, mess with those big shoes. Yeah, that's it. My background is definitely not in any 2D, and I've come at my career in a very, like, tunnel vision, just making pots in that way. And then this is sort of what's come out creatively. And yeah, I think initially my pots were so much about form, and now I think I'm just as interested in the decorating part. So yeah.
Well, I think you're very modest, and believe me, you have a great color and shape sensibility. And I'm sure if you learned the materials of painting the way that the materials of clay and glaze, I have a feeling you could probably make some perfectly good paintings. Yeah. Um, so so we're looking at this piece, for instance. There are people looking at your work. We've talked about some of the glaze work and the way you're getting the imagery on, but your work, all of it, I think, if I'm correct, is soda fired.
Yep, except for the wheel thrown fruit.
Okay.
That would be the only thing that isn't. I just electric fire that. Yep.
So for people who might not know much at all about the making of ceramics, talk a little bit about soda firing.
Yeah, I use gas. You can use wood as a fuel source, which would change the work somewhat too. So it's a hard brick gas kiln that I use. And basically my work is just red clay with light clay over the top, and then colored clay, which is called underglaze, is how the painting is being applied. And the glaze is actually me spraying soda ash in the kiln at peak temperature. And that's what gives the variation. Or like in this piece, you can see those pink spotting. That's from like reoxidizing and the grog. And maybe like what makes my work a little bit innovative or different than traditional soda fired or salt fired work is it's fired to cone 2, which is just kind of a random place I ended up, rather than cone 10, which would be like stoneware temperature. So I'm at a middle to low range kind of temperature, and that's what the last 10 years I've spent developing that kind of weird spot to fire. And yeah.
Is that for color?
It came from when I was wood firing. There was sometimes in wood firing you can have problems because of using wet wood or a poorly designed kiln, and I didn't make it to temperature, to cone 10 kind of temperature. And there was some interesting results at a lower temperature, which made me think about just trying something else, a different temperature. And there was another potter, Matt Kelleher, who was working, just beginning to fire to cone 3 in a soda kiln. And so then, yeah, I just started playing around with that, and took a lot of, taking whole kiln loads and putting them in the dumpster, and yeah, lots of failing. And as I kind of made that my own, then it just keeps morphing. That this surface on this serving bowl was sort of one of the first surfaces, but if you look at some of the other work now, have changed that to gray or black. Yep, like this. So this jar, that whole surface is me playing with the whole background color. So yeah, there isn't like a terribly logical reason why I ended up there with the work, other than just the nature of experimenting and like having that in my blood, I guess, just interested in that.
Yeah. It's great, this mix of the pieces that have the, for lack of a better, the paintings of the fruit or the vessels, and then the pieces that literally become 3-dimensional still lives. It's a really great mix in the work, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
that's kind of trying to bring those colors in Randy's paintings to like a physical sense, like a sculptural, like
Yeah.
if you were to walk into a room and that would be, you would see those bottles, what would that experience be like?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Oh, you could make some of bottles that look like his. So are there, so Anne, were there more images from the show specifically that Tom chose that we should talk about? So tell us a little bit about this particular piece.
Yeah, so it has like the gray background slip, and then just red underglaze. And this I thought was just a nice example of I'm starting to play with brushwork. That's maybe the newest thing, is like adding that element, which is so common in pottery throughout history, is playing with the elegance of just like a solitary brush mark, and the abstract sort of flowers coming out of this vase. Yeah, just playing with that. And yeah, I think this form is also exciting. There's, whenever you take big steps sideways or forwards, or whichever ways you want to say, the forms sort of change with the surface, and this feels like the pot forms are moving forward with the painting on the pots, rather than a lot of the show is old forms from my past work, and I'm applying the painting. And so feels like that's what has to, keep evolving with the painting.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
This pot, it kind of had an aha moment that I didn't anticipate, which was that like transparency in the pints. And that it reads as like yellow glass, and that is just a exciting moment that happens in opening a kiln, that I wasn't expecting that. And now the next time I fire, I'll be seeking that moment, trying to make that play happen. So
Yeah, it's like you're chasing something. Is it hard to duplicate accidents like that?
Some, I think, in glaze work, probably more than anything. And of course, in a soda kiln, there's always the variance in how the pots, there's variance in how the firing happens. And so you kind of hypothesize the whole time you're loading, but every firing is different. And one, you might be loading a pot and think this is going to be a great spot, and then the pot next to it that maybe you're not as excited about, that one is the one that you're excited about. And when you unload, that's part of the fun. But
Yeah.
I think,
And like all that on the top of the pot, I'm guessing like you have no control over that. All that sort of creamy
But the
I don't-
creaminess has to do with temperature, but yeah, like the speckling and
Yeah.
even like the temperature that changes from time to time. So, and if I was teaching a class in soda firing, I would actually, line up 4 pots that have everything is exactly the same, but you could see the variation between, what's, sometimes my pots can look like latex paint all the way to, like a pumpkin orange. That's all the same slip surface. And that's the variation that happens throughout the kiln.
Yeah. It's
So,
great.
well, thanks. Yeah, I think that pot also, this pot I had mentioned that we should show that one too, is just like the playing with 2 colors. I mean, those are just 2 colors of my slip. And before, for the color blocking work, I was using graphics to kind of like sort of stitch those 2 colors together, or play with color in like an Albers kind of way, like a Joseph Albers kind of way. And then now that I look at it, it was like clearly I'm just trying to make a background and foreground, and it was for this work. It wasn't for the last body of work. So
Yeah. It's so beautiful. So you know what? Are there more pieces to talk about that we have images of? Oh, good, because I have other questions. So, at the beginning, Tom, when we talked about your education, I don't know how long ago that was. And so you have a Bachelor of Arts in Visual Art and a Bachelor of Science in Biology. Did you get those degrees simultaneously, or one and then the other?
So my biology and chemistry degree is in like anatomy and biochemistry. So that was to be a doctor or like to be a dentist, which never happened, obviously. And so I just had ceramics as an elective all through college. And then by the time I applied to dental school, then I decided maybe I should just stick with, or maybe I should try to make a career of making pots. So then I stayed in school for 1 more year.
Oh, good for us. Great. It's interesting. I know a lot of artists, and I feel like a lot of artists are another area they're interested in is science. Do you feel like your science background influenced your work at all, or is that too hard to quantify?
No, yeah, it does. I don't think it has any influence. If I took inorganic chemistry, that could be handy for glaze making, which isn't part of my practice.
Right. Oh, so you have done a lot of different residencies in your career, which is great. So, and there are some great residencies, especially in the fine crafts and in ceramics in this country, and you've done some of the best ones, or I would say the most prestigious ones. Again, for people who don't know a lot about artist residencies, maybe you could tell us quickly, like what that all involves, how long they usually last, but you go and live at a place and you work in that place. What do you think an artist gains from doing a residency as opposed to just staying home and being in their studio and working?
So lots to unpack there. A residency can really range from basically a work exchange or even a rental, all the way to maybe like the better ones have terms where you're getting paid and get space, or have modest or inexpensive rent. So, like the Archie Bray Foundation in Penland, those are 2 of the better residencies for crafts in the country, or maybe even the world. And the terms, like basically a really good one, like the Archie Bray Foundation, they have what I would say is like the best playground to play on. They have every kind of kiln, maybe 2 or 3 of them, every material. They have a clay manufacturing business. And so that allows you to, when I was developing that Cone 2 soda fired work, that was the perfect place to do that because it's much like university, except for you don't have to go to class or yeah, there's really no strings attached to that. And yeah, the difference, like a practical reason why you can't just set up a studio like I have behind me is one, there's a ton of overhead to that. So, I used artist residencies to build my savings so that I could do this rather than, you can't just come out of college and buy a house. So there's that part of it. But there's also that playground part of it that it just makes sense to, when you're trying to figure out what your personal work is, or maybe just develop it. For the better residencies, it's probably more of a development rather than finding it. So yeah, they're perfect for that. And my wife Maggie, she got an MFA. That's another way to, of course, get those similar kind of experiences. But I knew when I left college, I didn't want to be on a college campus again. So I kind of built my career that way with apprenticeships and residencies. And in a lot of ways, the Archie Bray Foundation was like my graduate school. And then Penland was just like a place for me and Maggie to like figure out what the next step after that and like continue to develop our work. So yeah, and then I think I glossed over the time. Like a residency could be 2 weeks and as long as 3 years. So it just depends. I think of going like international residencies, you're probably not going to stay for a long period of time because of the cost, and you're probably walking away from your life. Where Penland, their mission was to show the School of Crafts what a working artist would look like. So was a big part of what we did there.
What's the longest you spent at any of those places?
Well, Penland is a 3-year contract, so we spent 3 years there. And then the Archie Bray Foundation, the long-term residency is 2 years, but I did 2 years and then also 2 summers before that. So I was there for 5 years.
That's great. And in any of those places, do you teach?
I taught community classes, and at Penland, we taught a 2-month class after our residency was over. Yeah, it isn't part of it, but it can be. I think a lot of the, those are rural kind of residencies, and maybe like more urban residencies have teaching because there's a lot of people that are interested in that, and it's a way to make some money, of course.
Yeah. And so now you and Maggie both, so you're in your studio, you have a home with a studio attached or on the property, and you are both full-time artists.
Yep, Maggie teaches a little bit, but that seems to be going away, I think. So I would guess by next year she'll be done teaching. And yeah, we have 5 acres, live in an old farmhouse, an 1890s farmhouse, and work in a barn. So it's kind of like the country potter story that people before us paved, and we just followed that model.
It's great. So Tom, could you show people the studio just a little bit?
Sure.
You can give him the full screen.
I could start from the outside maybe real quick.
Because I would want to see your studio.
So that's our old farmhouse.
Great.
And then here's our, whoops. So that's just, it was never really a barn, just a barn style building that we inherited.
Yeah.
And then that's my kiln shed. So the soda kiln's in there.
Great. How cold is it right now?
Sub-zero.
Thanks for going outside.
Yep. So then this is where my studio is. So I have a pug mill and mixer and wheel. And then this is my wear rack. And then we have our electric kilns, glaze lab. And then if anybody ever comes to visit, we have a gallery, showroom area that's mostly empty because the winter's all about filling it up. And the only improvement we have to do is we'll put a sink right there, maybe this summer. And then this is Maggie's studio, so the upstairs is finished, or came finished when we bought this place. And yeah, so that's Maggie's makes pots here, and then we just had a heater installed, so it's kind of torn apart. But
Yeah.
Anybody who knows Maggie's work, she also is like a mixed media kind of academic artist as well as a potter.
Yeah, she had a terrific show here about a year ago in our number 5 space. That was outstanding.
Yep, she's
Yeah.
outstanding.
She is outstanding. So it's nice you kind of work together, but you have separate spaces.
Yeah, you have to have separate spaces because we don't want to listen to each other's music. So
That's what I was. So what, do you listen to music? Do you listen to podcasts? Watch sports events? Like, what do you do when you're
sports at night? A little bit. If you work at night, you get TV and beer as part of your work agenda. And during the day, podcasts. Maggie listens to a lot of books, and I listen to some books too.
Yeah.
And then, of course, some music.
Yeah. And what are you listening to right now? Anything you like? Any books?
The book I'm listening to is Bryce Courtney, Four Fires.
Okay.
Like a South African novelist. He kind of writes like orphan type stories. And yeah, my favorite podcast is Ear Hustle, which is about it's like about San Quentin, just like prison stuff, but in like a positive way.
Okay. All right. Ear Hustle. I'll remember that. I listen to podcasts when I'm in my studio. So yeah.
What's your favorite?
Gosh. It's varied. I listen to Ezra Klein a lot.
Okay.
Who writes for the New York Times, and I just like his interview style, and he talks to people about existentialism to literature to politics.
Yeah.
I listen to Unexplained, which I know Lauren listens to a lot, which is just about supernatural stuff, so it ranges. It seems like I listen to a lot of either kind of crazy supernatural things or politics.
Sure. You need like fluff and serious, whatever mood you're in.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, so great. I'm trying to think. Anne, Lauren, this has been a great conversation. Now the two of you can unmute yourselves. Do you have any thoughts, comments, questions, podcasts you want to recommend?
Well, I have sort of a technical question. I was wondering with all the different residencies that you do and the way that you fire your work, if there's like a big learning curve in sort of figuring out how the atmosphere in a kiln works as you move from place to place. Do you form relationships with your kilns?
Yeah, there's definitely is a learning curve. But Penland, I had my own kiln. So me and a buddy who builds kilns, we built that kiln. And what that did is allow me to realize what was wrong with that one that made my next kiln better. So there's that, but there's a big part of teaching is like exactly what you're talking about. So you kind of, whenever I teach a workshop, you get a new kiln and you have a batch of students who want results. And so you kind of, that helps with what you're saying of like the learning curve. Because, if I go to Wisconsin-Madison or something and teach a firing class, I I kind of have to like know how to get okay results at least. So yep, that's a big part of that learning curve, is just like firing all different kinds of kilns all over the country.
What are the inspirations for your forms? Like, are you looking at a particular area of ceramics or culture, or some sort of time period historically?
I'd say the forms are really just derived from Minnesota pots, because that's what basically I grew up going to the St. Croix Pottery Tour, which is where we live now, is in the St. Croix River Valley. And so, yeah, as a student, just going on a field trip to that and then handling those pots. And so my pots are really just about, yeah, that kind of like Warren McKenzie, Linda Christensen, Mark Ferris kind of pots. And the forms, a lot of it has to do with the surface too, that, like a square cup, how you like play with that when you're developing a surface. You have four sides to orient, whether it's the current work or the last work that was color blocking. That gives you a lot to play with for the two-dimensional part of it, versus like a round pot, that when you put something on a round pot, then you are orienting it. You're giving it a starting spot and a continuum. So that's a big part of it. But basically, yeah, I try to keep my pots pretty minimal in form.
So that you can paint on them.
Yep. Yeah, that's like my nature too. Yep. Just keep things pared down. Yep.
So, so related to that then, so you grew up with seeing pottery.
Just as like part of class, but yeah, I was like lucky to have ceramics as an elective in high school. So my high school teacher was a Randy Johnston student, and then that's how I knew to take it as an elective in university. It was because I liked it in high school. And so yeah, in high school I went to Northern Clay Center and on field trips, and then in college we did the same thing, Northern Clay Center, and then the St. Croix Pottery Tour. We would camp and do the tour.
Yeah.
So that was, it's sort of come full circle that I traveled around the country trying to figure out what my personal work is and what I want, and then move back right to where my favorite pots are. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Now my son plays with Linda Christensen.
Oh,
It's like a dream.
that's great. And so the life of like, so in this, I mean, you show with a lot of galleries, which are going to have, so you're going to be showing with them year round, like you are here. But there's also, there's a lot of studio tours and a lot of activity where I'm assuming you're exhibiting more in the warm seasons.
Well, I mean, the holiday season too, that's a big chunk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the downtime for Potter, like any retail would be like now until Mother's Day, which.
So is this like a really busy time in the studio where you and Maggie are building up inventory? Is there a season to how you sort of work in your studio?
Yep. Yeah. So like from now until me and Maggie are guests on that pottery tour, which is like, as far as financially and quantity of pots and stuff, that's the biggest event of the year. So we have to like build up a bunch of work for January to May, and then hopefully I don't sell all those pots. And then
you might.
Yeah, and then for the rest of the year it just feels like you're just trying to keep up. And I garden super hard, so the summer is like half pace, and basically I garden 30 hours a week and make pots 30 hours a week or 20 hours a week.
So, and I'm guessing you're making food, you're growing food and not just, flowers.
Yep. Yeah, I'm a vegetable gardener. Maggie likes flowers, or she does the flower gardening, and I do the vegetable gardening,
Yeah,
and she does the preserving.
that's great. So for anybody watching this, if you haven't been to the St. Croix Pottery Tour, and you can, it's really a fabulous event to go to. I haven't been there for a few years, but it's totally worth it. So Tom, whose studio are you showing at?
Me and Maggie are both guests at Linda Christensen's.
Great, good. Yeah, and it's always the weekend of Mother's Day, right? Is that
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah. So this will be the first year it's in person after 2 years off.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's the 30th anniversary, and it's like 7 stops on this tour and 60-ish potters as guests and hosts. So it's a big event.
Huge. That's fantastic. Anne, Lauren, any other questions? Thoughts? Tom, anything you think that we didn't cover that's particularly the most interesting things people should know about you?
No, we got a pretty good coverage, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to see your studio. We learned all
Yeah.
about you. We know about your technique, your inspirations. Well, the work is fantastic. I see Anne reading something. I don't know if someone's making a comment or.
Made a comment on Facebook. So Nadia Nigley, I hope I'm pronouncing that somewhat correct, writes, beautiful work. Thanks for sharing about your process and your studio, Tom. Can you talk a little bit more about how you decide which imagery should go on which pots? Is your thinking similar to how you place your abstract designs, or is it different?
Yeah, I mean, one thing you can do on bisqueware pots is graphite burns off. So you can, I just draw with a pencil a lot of times. And the same is true even for the color blocking, just kind of figuring out where things should go. Yeah, there isn't like a set shape when I'm making the pot or anything like that. I do think, sometimes there's like a liquor bottle that has a red pear on it. The red pear definitely echoes the same kind of bottom heavy volume that the pear does. And you can, make kind of quiet plays like that. And yeah, I think that like those rectangular plates in the show, those just make sense as a frame, that they're really framed in a similar proportion as like a Morandi painting. So I think I always want to paint pots on those plates, which I don't always, but they just kind of lend themselves really well. The space is sort of perfect for breaking it up in a balanced way to have pots on those plates. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah, good question. Well, so for people who are watching, the show is up. Tom's show is up through February 20th in the gallery. The whole show is also online. So if you can't make it here, again, we're located in Stoughton, Wisconsin. We're just south of Madison. It's a short drive. And we're in an old tobacco warehouse. And so the space is really interesting. And we represent about 100 artists from across the United States. And Tom's show is called Still Life, a Minimalist Approach. This conversation will be taped and it'll be available to view again on Facebook and on our website. And there's a video walkthrough of the show installation on Tom's page on our website as well. And also of note, there are 2 other shows in the gallery right now. One is in our number 5 space. It's by a local artist, Helen Hawley, who has a fabulous installation called Drained Lake. On our website, there's a talk that we had with her 2 weeks ago. And then we have a group show called Beautiful Fiction. So all the shows are great and I hope people can see them. Tom, thank you so much for sharing your studio with us. And thank you for sharing the fabulous work. The show looks beautiful in the space and we're delighted.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's exciting.
And Tom, you just froze, so we didn't hear what you said.
Oh,
But
sorry. I said thank you for inviting me. And yeah, it's exciting to have a show up like that. And yeah, I just appreciate y'all believing in the work. So thanks.
Absolutely. It's outstanding. Well, have a great evening. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks.
Okay, take care. Say hi to Maggie.
Will do.
Okay, good night.